To have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin here in New York, where former President Trump is expected to be in court for the second day of his civil fraud trial.
The fate of his business dealings in the state of New York hangs in the balance. On the trial's opening day, Trump came face to face with New York Attorney General Letitia James. She is suing Trump along with his oldest sons, Don Jr. and Eric, their companies, and several executives. The $250 million civil lawsuit alleges that Trump and his sons exaggerated their business assets for years to get favorable loan terms from lenders. The Trumps and their company deny any wrongdoing. Trump spoke to reporters as he arrived in court yesterday, slamming the allegations with language he has used many times before.
It's a scam, it's a sham. Just so you know, my financial statements are phenomenal.
The Judge Engoron, who is overseeing the case, already ruled last week that Trump committed fraud. There is no jury for this trial, so now Engoron is considering 6 other allegations raised by James, including falsifying business records and insurance fraud. AG James says she believes justice will prevail.
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
NBC's Lindsay Reiser is outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here to take a closer look at the case. So, Lindsay, let's start with you. Judge Engoron says he expects this trial is going to last well into December. So what were the major takeaways from day one?
Well, really, his entire business acumen is put into focus in this trial. Good morning to both of you and good to be with you. The trial did move a little quicker yesterday than expected. We went through opening arguments and our first witness jumped on the stand, will continue rather today. Now, inside, our producers tell us inside that courtroom, the former president appeared agitated at times. His arms were crossed. He was tapping his foot. As he went into lunch, he glared angrily at Attorney General James as she stared straight ahead. Then, in his remarks at lunch, the former president called for the judge actually to be disbarred, accusing him of election interference, even saying that some people say he should be criminally charged. At the heart of the opening arguments for both sides, the Attorney General's office is accusing the former president and his team of overinflating their assets to the tune of billions to get favorable loan terms, and that those values were determined by the former president himself. His defense team is arguing that valuations are subjective, also arguing that there was no intent to defraud, and saying that he didn't include his most valuable asset, his brand. Joe and Savannah?
Let's bring in Danny here on set with us and talk about what we have learned so far in opening statements. Trump's attorney said that the evidence demonstrates that there was no intent to defraud, and also that the loan transactions were, quote, successful and profitable. Is that enough? What do you make so far of what we know of the defense strategy?
We can break that up into 2 parts. The first part, the no intent to defraud, that is relevant. That is something we can expect the defense to put in evidence about. The second part, not so powerful. The idea that banks, there was no harm, no foul because we actually paid back all our loans on time and nobody actually suffered any injuries. That misunderstands how finances work. And Trump knows this. This is a world that he lives in and knows very well. When you defraud a bank in order to get, for example, a favorable loan, if you give them false information, then you're exposing the bank to risk it isn't aware of. And that is the harm visited upon the bank. Yes, in fact, nothing bad happened because, as he says, maybe he paid the loans back. But you can imagine that that rationale would mean that you could lie to banks all the time to get favorable loan terms as long as you pay your money back on time. That's not how the business world works. That's not how finance works.
So, Lindsay, the prosecutor's first witness was Donald Bender. That's Trump's former accountant. What did we hear from his testimony, and do we know anything about Trump's reaction to that?
And he testified last year at the tax fraud trial against Trump Organization companies. He testified that he compiled the financial statements that the Attorney General's office has included inflated values using information provided by the former president and his team. Now, the president, according to our producers and reporters inside the courtroom, appeared beet red during some of this testimony, was whispering to his attorneys. But also the judge appeared to hand him a minor win at the end, essentially saying that some of this testimony did appear old, that it would have to be tailored to the statute of limitations at hand, which the president did decree as a victory once that court adjourned for the day.
Danny, we heard from the former president himself several times outside the courtroom yesterday. Put in context kind of how often we see something like that, the defendant themselves talking so much, and also what could that potentially mean if he were to take the stand? What would testimony kind of mean when we're hearing so much from him as it is?
Here's what you do sometimes see, and I've done this myself. After a verdict is entered, and whether it's good or bad for your client, sometimes the client or the attorney go to the courthouse steps. We've seen this in movies. And they vow to appeal, or they talk about the case. Prosecutors do this, too. That's not what Trump's doing. This is the middle of the trial. He's walking out into the hallway, it looks like. And I've been in that courthouse many times. I think I know where he is. He's not that far away from the courtroom. So he's going into the hallway, basically, and complaining about the judge yards away from where the judge is. And you wonder, if you're the judge, what do you do about that? Do you send court staff out there to shoo everybody away? You're not just shooing away some litigant. You're shooing away the former president and a Secret Service detail and an entire gaggle of reporters, press, photographers, everything. So maybe if Justice Engoron even knew about it, he probably just thought, let him go. But you don't do those kinds of things to a judge who is still deciding your fate, especially when this is a bench trial and there is no jury. The judge, who has already signaled how he feels about the defense, is going to be listening. Now, does that mean he'll be biased against Trump? Not necessarily, but it's never a good idea to annoy a judge.
Absolutely. Danny Ceballos here on set with us. Lindsay Reiser just downtown from us outside the courthouse. Thank you so much both for kicking us off as day 2 unfolds.
This morning, President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is expected to appear in federal court in Delaware. He'll be arraigned on 3 gun charges.
Hunter Biden is expected to plead not guilty to charges that he allegedly lied on a federal form to obtain a firearm. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now from outside that courtroom. That's in Wilmington, Delaware. Hey, Mike, good morning. So Biden's own lawyers fought to make it so that he would not have to appear in person today, but they were rejected. What can we expect from Hunter Biden's arraignment today?
Well, Savannah, this should be a routine proceeding, well, as routine as any court proceeding can be when it involves the son of the sitting president of the United States. And I should emphasize should be routine, because we remember what happened just about 10 weeks ago when I was standing outside this same courtroom, when we then expected a routine proceeding in which Hunter Biden would enter into that plea agreement that his attorneys had reached with federal prosecutors, not just on these gun-related charges, but also on tax charges. That deal, of course, unraveled under some probing questions from the judge overseeing this case, Mary Ellen Noriega, in which she questioned not just the terms of this agreement, but also how it was supposed to be implemented. So today's proceeding follows from that the collapse of that agreement, and now we expect, as you say, Hunter Biden to plead not guilty to these charges. Now, Hunter Biden's attorneys point out that these specific charges that he's going to be pleading to today have never been brought before in this jurisdiction, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware. They've also faced constitutional challenges. The judge overseeing this case can, based on today's proceedings, either set a trial date or maybe order the parties to go back to the drawing board and try to reach a new plea agreement.
Mike, you talk about how unprecedented those charges are there. Remind us exactly what those charges are and the possible sentence realistically they could carry if convicted.
Sure. Now, we're familiar, of course, with the background checks that are required when you purchase a firearms. Those forms require an individual to certify that they are not under the influence of narcotics. This purchase occurred just about 5 years ago exactly at the peak of Hunter Biden's drug addiction. So 2 of the charges stem from him falsifying information, certifying that he was not, when he in fact was under the influence of narcotics. The third has to do with the owning of the gun under those terms itself. It could carry a charge, a maximum charge, if all 3 charges were given the maximum sentence of 25 years in prison and $750,000 fine. Unlikely in this case, even if it were to go to trial and he were to be found guilty, because he is a first-time offender. Now, what we're also waiting for is what happens to those tax charges that Hunter Biden was also set to plead guilty to about 10 weeks ago. We're still waiting for the U.S. Attorney, David Weiss, to move on those charges. All
right, Mike Memoli in Delaware. Mike, thank you so much.
Well, police in the nation's capital say a Texas congressman was the victim of a carjacking in D.C. last night. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar, according to a statement from his chief of staff. He was not injured when his car and luggage were stolen by 3 armed assailants. The incident took place around 9:30 on Monday, about a mile from the nation's capital, in a neighborhood where dozens of lawmakers live. No arrests have been made at this time.
The clock is now ticking on a vote that could remove Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker. After teasing it over the weekend, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz officially filed a motion to force a House vote on whether to boot McCarthy from the speakership.
I have enough Republicans where at this point next week, one of 2 things will happen. Kevin McCarthy won't be the Speaker of the House, or he'll be the Speaker of the House working at the pleasure of the Democrats. And I'm at peace with either result, because the American people deserve to know who governs them.
Gaetz has long been opposed to McCarthy's leadership. He made this latest move after the speaker worked with House Democrats to avert a government shutdown this past weekend.
While Gaetz admits McCarthy can probably survive a first vote to oust him, the speaker will likely need to rely on Democrats to save his job. McCarthy has welcomed the challenge, simply saying, "Bring it on." NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us on the latest. Hey, Ali, good morning. So where do we go from here? How much support does Matt Gaetz have in this push to oust the speaker?
Well, look, we're actively trying to do that counting ourselves. And you know that as hard as we're trying, the Speaker's office and allies are trying even harder to understand just what he might have to do to keep his job. Because as many Republicans as he loses, over 4 or 5, depending on how many people are in the chamber, that's going to depend on how many Democrats he needs for support. And when we say support, that might not mean outright, yes, I vote to keep McCarthy. That might just mean voting present or not being in the chamber. This vote can happen at any point in the next 2 days. That's how long leadership has to actually buy themselves the time to sort of get their ducks in a row here. We don't know exactly when the vote is going to happen, but we know the outside parameters of what could govern it. So that's really what McCarthy is working within right now. The thing that I'm looking at as we sit here on Tuesday is whether or not there's any way that this vote could possibly stretch into Thursday. And the reason that I ask that is because that's the day that there are funeral proceedings and commemorations for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein of California. Many in the California delegation, many of whom are Democrats, would likely go home to attend those, and that could make an attendance issue on the Democratic side. That's just one of the things that I'm looking at. But if we're sitting here on Tuesday and he's only got 2 days, I'm not sure that the vote can stretch until Thursday. But again, it's a numbers game. It's not just how many Democrats does McCarthy need to get on board to offset the Republicans that he's going to lose. And right now I count 4 or 5. It's also a question of what's the total number in the chamber, because that changes the number that he's trying to count to keep his job.
And Ali, does Gaetz have anyone in mind to replace Speaker McCarthy?
Look, I asked this exact question yesterday because, as we've said a billion times and will probably say until we know a name, you cannot replace McCarthy with nobody. When I asked Gaetz this yesterday, he got kind of snippy about it, but then ultimately said that he wasn't going to offer any names. He himself was not running for Speaker, but he thought that there could be people out there. Now, the names that we often hear, people like Jim Jordan, he's an ally of Speaker McCarthy. He's also running the impeachment inquiry. I don't get the sense that he wants this job. Someone like Tom Emmer, who's currently the whip in McCarthy's leadership operation, has said that he doesn't want this job. Steve Scalise is the number 2 Republican right now, maybe someone that we would have looked at, but the calculus has to, or maybe has changed because he's currently undergoing cancer treatment. That's something that Gaetz himself referenced yesterday, saying that Scalise could be someone, but because of his health right now, that's an open question.
So, and Gaetz said McCarthy's almost certainly going to need to rely on Democrats to keep his speakership. Do we have any idea what the Democrats are thinking here? What are they going to do?
Oh, man, this is the ultimate question. Aside from if not McCarthy, then who? Because I've talked to several moderate Democrats who may be open, but it's politics. You don't get something for nothing if you're McCarthy. And for Democrats, there would have to be concessions made with how the House is run, maybe certain pieces of legislation. I'm thinking, for example, about Ukraine funding. There are key things that there could be points of commonality on. McCarthy would have to concede those to Democrats in the same way that, frankly, he conceded to the hard line of his party to get this job in the first place back in January. Those conversations probably would have to happen. My understanding is they have not happened yet. And there are just as many Democrats, frankly, way more, the majority, who say this is a Republican problem. Let them figure it out. The chaos looks good for the Democrats politically.
Absolutely. Ali, before we let you go, I do quickly want to switch gears, talk about LaFonza Butler, set to be sworn into the Senate later today, taking the seat of the late Dianne Feinstein. What can we expect this afternoon?
Look, this is a swearing in that we expect to see later this afternoon, and it's the first moment that it could possibly happen because the Senate doesn't come back until today. Our understanding is that that swearing in will happen, and then you will now have a senator serving in the seat of the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. This week, though, will be shorter on the Senate side because of commemorations for Feinstein, as we mentioned. Those will happen on Thursday. But really, for Butler, I think the important thing to remember here is we will have an open question about whether or not she seeks the seat that she's currently having at Newsom's request. That's something that he said she was not banned or stopped from doing, but that's a very crowded primary field of California legislators who have already been in this race for months, who have been raising millions of dollars, and this is not going to be an inexpensive seat. I will say, as Butler is serving, she will now be the only Black woman serving in the Senate chamber. There hasn't been a Black woman serving there since then Senator Kamala Harris when she got elevated to VP.
Ali Vitale covering it all for us this morning. Thank you so much. Well, it is fall, but when you walk outside, it's probably still going to feel like summertime in parts of the country.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with more on these warm October temperatures. Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. And we are going to break records once again today. We broke records on Sunday. We broke more records yesterday. And we're going to do that once again today because temperatures are going to soar into the 80s and 90s once again. Unseasonably warm from the plains to the east. And then back behind a cold front, we're feeling very fall-like. So this is all going to move east over the next several days. But first, today, you need the short sleeves. You need the shorts because temperatures near 90 degrees in so many spots. Chicago today, 87 degrees. That's 20 degrees above normal for this time of year, near 90 also in St. Louis, Cincinnati. It's warm too in Minneapolis, 84 degrees. We're going to hit 90 degrees in Memphis. That's about 12 degrees above what they typically see this time of year. And warm too in the Northeast, Burlington, Vermont, 82, New York City, 81. That's well above average. And again, records will be broken. Tomorrow we'll keep that heat in place, but notice in Chicago, it's still above average, but cooler than it had been. So 15 degrees above average tomorrow, but in the low 80s, 85 in Indianapolis. Still really warm in parts of the Northeast. D.C., we're going to hit 84 degrees or nearby there, 84 in New York City, and Buffalo, 89 degrees. That's near 90 in Buffalo, New York in October. Temperatures are going to lower later on this week into the weekend. It's going to feel fall-like once again by Saturday and Sunday, but notice Minneapolis feeling fall-like even by Thursday into the mid-60s. Big temperature drop once again Friday and Saturday into the low 50s. Same story in Indianapolis. We're going to be into the upper 50s by Saturday, holding on to that warmth in Philadelphia on Thursday near 80, also on Friday, but a big drop off, 71 degrees on Saturday, and then into the 60s Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Now, we have that cold front. That's sort of the dividing line between that fall-like air back to the west and that really warm air into the east that I just showed you. Along this front, we're going to see a lot of rain. It could be very heavy at times. That could lead to some flooding and also the chance for some strong to severe storms. So that's from Texas to Minnesota. Localized downpours are possible, and we could see the chance of some hail, some tornadoes, some really gusty winds. Tomorrow, we'll see that cold front move a little bit further to the east. It's going to get a little bit hung up in the south, and that's going to bring that severe weather threat into the south. And we could see some really heavy flooding tomorrow. That's going to lead to an area, a pretty big area of flash flooding tomorrow. So I'll show you that in just a minute. But this is what it looks like in terms of the severe weather threat. Where you see that orange there, that includes Rapid City. That's the likeliest spot of seeing some tornadoes. Back to you guys.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.